Yo, it's Guido coming at you with the tactics talk. Let's talk today about the best tanks. What are the best tanks? What are the best? That's a great discussion, and it happens on the forum quite a bit. You have somebody come in and put a video out, or put a forum post, say, "Hey, this is a great tank," or "This is a garbage tank," and then of course everyone piles in, "No, it's great. No, it's garbage." So what does that mean when you say the best tank? For me, it breaks down, I think, into three areas. There is the objectively best tank that the numbers say is the best. It does the best. It has the highest win rate, has the highest win rate, DPG, all that good stuff. Now, it's not often the same tank that has all of those things, but the best tank will have a lot of those in the top three, say. So what's the best tank in win rate? What's the best tank in win rate? And we're gonna talk about this in a given tier and a given class. So we're not gonna cross classes. We're not gonna cross tiers. For example, today we're gonna talk about tier 6 mediums. What is the best tier 6 medium? So you have the objectively best by the numbers. You have that can be broken down into several things as well. We're gonna concentrate on last 60 days off of a website called tomato.gg on NA. And I may, in this series, open this up to other things. It does change between regions. So current meta, tier 6, medium, objectively stats-wise, what's the best tank? Number 2 is the best tank for a given skill level. We're not going to dive into that too much, but there are tank curves where you can take a look at it and look at how a tank performs given the skill level of the player. Does it overperform for everyone? Is it a high skill ceiling, high skill floor, meaning good players can really maximize its capabilities, but it has a lot of weaknesses that bad players can find themselves getting in trouble with. Things like perhaps the Baras would be a good example of that. Although the Baras gets played by a lot of people and performs well anyway. But I'll just throw that. It's just a good top end, but it can also be difficult at the bottom end. Or is it a tank that bad players overperform in? Think of things like maybe the Defender, the 703-2, some of those kinds of tanks where the armor, the rest of the tank is good enough that the armor can help them survive mistakes, that kind of thing. So there's objectively the best. We're going to concentrate on the last 60 days, current meta. There is for a given skill set or kind of player, and then there's for the individual, the last one. And I think probably we argue a lot based on our own opinions of how good the tank is, and it is largely colored by how we do it or how we feel about it. And what I found as I was looking at some of these arguments and discussions, I would look at the tank and go, well, all right, I kind of like that tank, but I don't agree that it's that good. And then I looked at the numbers, I went, well, the numbers say it is that good. So not only do I like it, but for my skill set, I do well in it, and the numbers say it's good. So it's hard to argue that it's not good from my own perspective. And I think if we can kind of try to keep the understanding of what it is we're actually talking about when we say it's good. Are we saying objectively the numbers show it's good, ergo it's good? It may not be good for an individual. Or are we talking about skill level? Is it good at a skill level, or is it good just for an individual? Because an individual can really like a bad tank and do well in it. That doesn't necessarily make it in the large scheme, a great tank overall. So I'm using tanks.gg. We're gonna for today just take a quick look at tier 6 mediums. And right here in the garage, I've got the 3045M. And if you asked me yesterday before I looked at all this stuff and said, all right, Guido, what's one of the best tier 6 medium tanks? I'd say 3045M, probably Cromwell B. Although personally, this is an interesting one. I don't particularly like the Cromwell B. I do okay in it, but it's really not my cup of tea, although I would have told you then that it's a great tank and does really well. And another one that I liked is the Firefly VC. One tank I would tell you if you said, what don't you like at tier 6? I would have told you, let me find the thing, this tank, the FL10. I would have said that's a bad tank. It's not very good. I'm at 44% with I don't know how many battles I've got in it. Another one I might have told you was bad. Let's see, where did the one go? I would have told you the Poudel and the Breton were okay, but not great. All right, so there's a couple I threw out at you. That was just a couple days ago as I was thinking. So let's take a look at what the truth is, really. So this is the tomato.gg website. You go over to tank stats, and you get this. What we're going to do is we're going to select for tier 6, and we're going to select for medium. And up here you can see we've got NA. You can go NA, EU, and Asia. Unfortunately, this site does not have RU. I would like that. Actually, that would be very cool. We're going to stick with NA. It does change a little bit, sometimes fairly significantly, but we'll stick with NA because most of you are playing NA, and it serves for the discussion. So this is not me telling you this tank is fantastic across the whole board. This is more a discussion about what makes a good tank, and then with the sidebar of in NA, these are the facts of the matter in NA. So we have tier 6, mediums, last 60 days right here on NA. So win 8, what do we got? Sort it that way, and the Rudy, the Polish Rudy is number 1 win 8. Okay. The Panzer IV-S, what? Not played very much, we'll get that in a minute. The Stur 4257, I believe it. There's the Cromwell B, that's one I mentioned. Skoda T40, are you kidding me? Not very many played. And then the T3045 comes down to there. There's the Breton that I talked about. There's actually a Tech Tree tank in the top 10. Breton and Pudel, which are basically the same tank. All right, that's win 8. So what can we glean from some of that? To me, the Rudy is a total surprise. Played a considerable amount, but not nearly as much as the Cromwell B. Doing very well win 8-wise. Remember, that doesn't take into account spotting. The Panzer IV-S is a complete surprise. I never would have guessed that in a million years. But there's the numbers, folks. Hard to argue. Not played very much. Stur 4257, I'm not that surprised by it. It's got a little autoloader. It really has some pretty good strengths. I liked it okay. Cromwell B, I think everyone sort of expected that to be in the top 10 or near the top. I would have expected it to be higher, and it's played a lot at 104,000. Skoda T40, 22,000, and the 3485M. Played, I think, probably about the most. Just sort that real quick. Yes, on NA, played the most, 3045, followed by the Rudy, the USSR version, then the Tech Tree Cromwell. That's win 8. What about win rate? Cromwell B jumps up to the top. I'm not surprised. The Rudy, the Polish version, drops to second when it was number 1 on win 8. The Bretagne comes up, actually, to a nice win rate. The Breton and the Panthers have a lot of hit points. That helps with win rate. It helps you stay in the fight. It was already pretty good win 8-wise, then you add the extra hit points, and it's fairly tough armor for a medium. And you've got a pretty good end game tank that will get you towards the end game and help you win. Sturv is an autoloader. They do well if you can preserve your hit points at the end. There's a 3001. There's a Tech Tree tank creeping in to the top 5. A little bit surprised by that. You will not find that at tier 8 very much at all. There are so many tier 8 premiums, both heavies and mediums. Rarely do you get a Tech Tree anywhere near the top 10 in anything. There are some exceptions, but there you got it. A nice Tech Tree tank getting in there. And that actually, I don't remember if that's one of the collector's vehicles or not. FL10 gets there, and there's our T3045, the one I would have told you was the best at that tier. Now let's go back over here real quick to win 8. Talk a little bit about numbers of battles, and specifically the T40, which I was thinking that's a reward vehicle, but it's not. That's the Skoda T45, but it's not played very much. And none of these are really reward vehicles or vehicles that are hard to get to in terms of players. At tier 8, you find some of that stuff. You get these reward vehicles that are Clan Wars rewards, or some of the harder missions for the personal campaigns. You can often find that you have some tanks that have a limited set of people play it, typically good players. This gets into the discussion earlier about, is it good, and then who plays it? Well, really good and experienced players play it. Okay, and those don't necessarily have to be the same thing. You have more experienced 50%ers, but they've got a lot of experience. That tends to keep the skill level of the tank high, and it does pretty well right there. So, but we don't really have any of those in here. These have all been pretty much available as we've gone along to just about anybody. So there you go, Panzer IV-S. If you went and posted on the forum that the Panzer IV-S is an awesome tier 6 medium, you'd probably get a lot of pushback. I wouldn't give you too much, but I am surprised that it's number 1 in Win 8. However, it is played not very much. It is played not very much. This is played a bunch, the 3045. So the fact that it's that high and is played that much indicates to me that that's quite a good tank. So this is where we can get into those kind of small arguments, the caveats, when you say, I think the 3045 is the best tier 6 premium, and then someone comes and does what I said, says, no, it's clearly the Panzer IV-S. Then you can have that discussion about, well, I see what you're saying there, and it does have a better 1.8, but also realize that the 3045M is getting played by everybody at all skill levels, played the most on NA, and it's still cracking the top 10 and doing very well, thank you very much. So if you looked at the tank curves on that, I know that this one in particular does outperform pretty much across the board. Does pretty well. And then you can have all the same arguments with the other tanks right here. Just look really quickly at DPG and see if that changes things up. All right, well, there's that 3045. Gets up to the top at DPG. The Sturv, the Rudy, these are all some of the standard suspects. Panzer IV doesn't drop too far. We'll go to frags. 3045 is number 1. Okay, there you go. 3045 is number 1 on frags. These all look more or less the same. No big surprise there. Panzer IV-S drops down. Damage ratio, T-3445M, getting there. So there are other things going on here when you get into the expected values for Win 8, and that does talk a considerable amount to these numbers right here, right? So again, we can get into those discussions like, okay, well, the expected on the Panzer IV-S is pretty low. So if you do any kind of good on it, then you're going to start cranking out Win 8 on that thing. So that's why you take into account these other things. None of this is done in a vacuum. So now we start to see that 3045 is actually starting to show up towards the top. It's second in damage ratio, which is nice. Kill to death nope, number 1. I couldn't find it because it's number 1. Survival, what happens there? Not bad, top 5. And spots, a little bit lower. This tends to have to do with speed. That makes sense. The 2 Cromwells, A43, the 3001, these are all very fast. So they tend to get forward and get spots. So there you go. What is the best tier 6 medium tank? Well, by the numbers, at least Win 8, it's Panzer IV-S. Win rate, Panzer IV-S drops down quite a bit. I still would say it's probably the 3045. Just based on these other numbers, DPG, frags, damage ratio is number 2, kill to death is number 1, survival is okay. You might be able to make an argument for the Sturv. The Sturv really hangs in there near the top 3 for a lot of this and gets some number 1s in there as well. So that one is one you may want to argue as well. It's higher than the 3045 in win rate, and in Win 8 it is higher. So there's certainly an argument there, and it is played 68,000 times. So those two, I think, are definitely in the running, and you probably chuck the Cromwell B. Let's just take a quick look at the Cromwell B. In terms of that, it's down here on 4th on Win 8. It is number 1 on win rate. DPG does lose out a little bit on frags, and that's that little gun. It's just a pew-pew gun down there. It's number 2, though, on frags, so doing good on closing out. Damage ratio, where did it drop to? Oof, all the way down here. So it looks like people get beat up in that thing pretty well. Kill to death, drops down again. So really this one doesn't pass the smell test for me in terms of best tier 6, although its spots are number 1. Spots are number 1. So really for me, it's 3045. Sturv are definitely in the running, and they're both played a lot. Cromwell B is maybe a distant 3rd. And of course the Rudy, we take a look at this. There's 2 versions of the Rudy, so that's a little bit difficult. There's the USSR and the Polish Rudy, but they are basically the same tanks. Just really quickly before we close this out, where does it sit? It's number 1 on Win 8. The Rudy is number 2 on win rate. Now what happens to it here? Goes down to 3rd in frags, to 4th, damage ratio to 4th. So it's holding its own, but I don't think I would say it makes the best. Probably the Sturv, or in my case, the 3045M. So why do I then stick with 3045M? If we expand that out of just the numbers argument, then we look at how it performs in terms of players. it's played so much, it's overperforming, I would say, and for everybody. And then for me personally, for the third thing I talked about, so we got the numbers, we've got the skill level kind of idea, and the individual idea. For me personally, I tend to do about the best in that thing at tier 6. I just really like the tank. It works all around for me. So there you go. Next time you see a forum post or a video, someone saying the best this, the best that, there's a lot of different rabbit holes we can go down, but I think you can take some of that and put it all together and come up with your idea of what the number one tier 6 medium tank is. And if somebody makes the argument that it's the Rudy or that it's the Sturv, understand that it's very possible that based on what it is that they're arguing, it could very well be construed as the number one. We'll go through this in some other tiers as well, because it gets really interesting at tier 8. There's some things to chuck in there in terms of the reward tanks and the ways you get some of these tanks when you have these arguments about what's a great tank and what's not a great tank. It's really interesting at some of the higher tiers. That's all I've got. Let me know what you think down below. What is your number one tier 6? Why do you think it's number one? What numbers in here did I miss? Is there something in here that was really important in these kind of top 10 tanks as I was going through this very quickly that maybe I missed, or a point that is important, another caveat that's important to come up with what the best tier 6 or best tank overall anyway at any tier is? Let me know what that is down below, because I'm learning. One thing I do need to dig into more that I'm not as comfortable with as I'd like to be is the tank curves. I get the general gist of it and the idea of it, but analyzing exactly what some of those things mean is slightly beyond me, other than the general idea of it. So if you got any advice on that, I'll be happy to take it as well. That's all I've got for today, guys. I hope you have a good one. We will see you.